Hey everyone, a couple of years ago I made a video on changing the oil on a V-Star 1100 without an oil filter relocation kit. I also shared some views on why I thought the kit was not entirely necessary. I listened to a lot of the feedback from people over the years as I've read through the comments as people had posted it and watched the video, and I thought that a lot of it was valid. I recently got my hands on a filter relocation kit. So we're going to take a look at this kit today, and then we're going to install it in this V-Star 1100. We're going to inspect our installation work, make sure everything's okay, and we're just going to see, how much more convenient it is to have this kit other than how it was originally designed. Because maybe making this maintenance task easier will get more people to change their oil more often, protecting the overall condition of the motorcycle. So let's get started. And the kit I'm using today is part number 0712-0171, also known as BA-2640-00. And this kit is not cheap. I've seen online average price is around $240 US. Another thing to consider is the filters. The K&N 303 Charlies are about $17 a piece. You could get the Yamaha filters for this as well. The 3 Fox Victors, they're going to be about $15 a piece. This is about 2 to 3 times as much for the standard filter you'd find for this motorcycle. Not a big deal overall. I'm just pointing it out, something to consider. With all that now out of the way, let's begin with the installation. Because I'm not starting this project till tomorrow, I'm going to take this opportunity and spray the exhaust studs with a little bit of PB Blaster, let it sit overnight. I don't really need to do this because I use anti-seize on those studs, but it's good practice. It's definitely not going to hurt. I'm also going to hit this exhaust clamp too. You'll remember if you watch my other video that I actually broke this clamp, so we're going to do that as well. I got slip-on pipes right here, as most people do. We're going to be loosening this clamp right here to remove the back portion of the pipe. This is 11 millimeter. I'm going to be doing this portion of the job without too much commentary. If you want to watch this with more commentary, you can watch my original oil change video, because the focus here is really on the installation of the oil filter relocation kit. The rear mounting bolt of this pipe is then removed with a 6 millimeter hex. Slip-on is then jostled up and down and then pulled out of the pipe. No problem at all. We can see the clamp right there. Take a look at the pipe, inspect it. Everything looks fine. We'll move it out of the way to a safe place. Now temporarily drop that screw back in. So I don't lose it unless you have a tray to put it in. Whatever. We can see looking at the end of the floorboard, it doesn't allow enough room to contort the pipe out from the exhaust studs. So very little room. And this plate right here provides even less room between those 2 points. So we're going to loosen the floorboards a little to get some more room. These floorboards aren't on every bike. Mine's a Silverado. You may not have this problem. So we're going to loosen these 2 nuts right here, just about 5 turns or so. These are 14 mil. Now with it loosened, we can see the deflection. More importantly, from the top, we can now see there's adequate room to remove the pipe from the exhaust studs. Next, we're going to remove the nut holding on the bracket for the rear brake fluid reservoir. This is 8 millimeter. Take off the metal protective cover, store it away. And either find a safe place for that screw you just removed or put it back where you found it. These 2 nuts on the exhaust studs have been soaking overnight, even though mine has anti-seize on the studs. I'm going to be using a 12 mil. Loosen them progressively, rotating one at a time. We can see that it's not too difficult for me. These are generally loosened with regularity as we change the oil, so it's not like they've been sitting on here for 10 years. Notice how small this ratchet is. It's not a big ratchet. I'm not exerting a lot of pressure. If you are having a problem with these, you may need to use some propane. It's possible, propane and oil. Again, these are soaking overnight. I'm also supporting it as I loosen it with my other hand if need be. Taking my time. Don't want to break a stud. Not concerned. If you're really putting a lot of force on it, don't stop. Use heat. Use penetrating oil if you have to. It's not worth breaking. And I'm just unscrewing with my fingers, no problem. Gently pull the pipe forward off the studs. After it comes off the studs, I pull it past the brake reservoir. Notice how easily it clears since it was unscrewed, allowing the reservoir to give way. I'll inspect the condition of the exhaust gasket as well as any evidence of leaks and replace the gasket at this time if necessary. I'm going to be using a 17 mil or 11/16 stubby box wrench for the next step with a small hammer. Just going to place it in like so. As you see, we have adequate clearance. I'm just going to use the hammer to give it a couple of light raps just to break the torque, so we'll be able to loosen the bolt with our hand. Once the oil draining is started, I'm going to clean the areas around the workplace. We're now going to loosen all 5 screws holding in this cover plate. This is M5 hex, one at a time. The previous loosening of the floorboard provides easy access to the bottom bolt. Each bolt is then hand turned out, noting the position of the bolt in the cover on the floor as I remove them. With all 5 bolts removed, I gently take the cover right off. I laid the bolts down on the floor as they would have appeared on the cover as I was removing them. Once the cover's out, you could just simply place the bolts right into the cover, just like this, and that way you won't mix them up. Some of them are different sizes, so it's just a good idea. Again, we'll clean this area before opening up the next cover. The rubber O-ring holds this cap on pretty good. If you can't get a good grasp on it, you could also use a flat pair of pliers like this to give it a little bit of turn, just to break that seal a little bit, and then pull like this. Eventually the seal will break and you can pull this cover right off. With the cover removed, we could see the 2 O-rings we're going to have to save right here. Put that off to the side. And this apparently is a demonstration as to why you should put a rag down before you attempt to remove this oil filter and cover all these hoses and brackets and parts of the brake system with oil. Now I get to clean all this stuff up. I'll do it off camera, but you've learned from my mistake, so you don't do it. Going to clean out the inside of this area where the oil filter was, make sure that there are no surprises. Just remove any debris. I want a clean area for the seal. I'm going to clean this piece, and then I'm going to remove the 2 seals before I put this piece in the boneyard. Make sure these seals are still good once everything's washed up. Piece is good. I'm going to gently remove the seals, starting with the outer orange one. Just comes right off, no problem at all. The black one, just start off and spin this around. This comes off pretty easy too. Again, if I see any problem with these seals, I'm just going to have to replace them. I got spares. This piece will go in the boneyard, it's done. Those 2 O-rings will then be degreased and then cleaned and then rinsed before them being re-oiled. And this is the first time we actually get to take out the kit for this project. I want to cut out the pieces in such a manner as to leave that plastic protectant from the packaging around the chrome parts as much as possible for the installation. There's the oil filter. Now I'm going to cut out the rest of the parts. This way, as I run it through the frame and all the other places around the engine, I don't have to worry about scratching up anything. The plastic will still be on it. And here's the package of parts and instructions that also arrived with this unit. I'm going to pull back the protective plastic to expose the working area on this part. Put a small amount of fresh motor oil in a container. I'm going to put the motor oil on this black O-ring. And place this O-ring carefully over the whole unit, all the way down into that ridge where the black O-ring is supposed to go. Now I'm going to apply oil a couple times around that ring until it gets saturated under the ring in that ridge. I'll then repeat this process for the orange O-ring, fresh oil, and it just lays right on top over here till this stop, just like that. And I'll apply some extra oil on there as well. Also be sure to tighten each hose fitting with a 13 and 16 millimeter wrench. Going to clean out this area one more time with a clean paper towel all around, and then I'll apply fresh oil to that entire surface. If you have floorboards like I do, you're going to have to turn them out maybe another 10 turns like I have in order to fit this new unit in, or it's going to get stuck. From the front of the bike, I negotiated over the brake reservoir bracket, bringing it forward. This is why I left the plastic protectant on it. Then I just sort of rest it down, reposition myself around the side of the bike, lift it up and straighten out those two lines so everything's standing straight, and just press it right in. No problem at all. Looking at the screws I placed in the cover as a reference, we look at the screw all the way on top. It's the smallest screw. This is the one that's going to go in on the top left. They really could have just told you in the instructions what size screw to use, but they really did a poor job of addressing this. The next screw is going to be this one right here. It's going to be placed on this side on the top right. Notice the place I took it out of the cover. The third screw is provided by them, adding the copper crush washer they also provide, and that's going to go in on the bottom. I'm just finger turning these in right now just for placement, nothing more. You may have to move the cover left and right to get it centered as you do this. Now I'm just going around alternating by hand. There's no ratchet, and I'm just taking out the slack from each one. Just a couple turns, going to the next one, couple turns, taking out the slack slowly, trying to keep everything even. So I started my torquing routine alternating around the screws till they all hit 30 inch-pounds, and then 60 inch-pounds, and then finally 90 inch-pounds. But I noticed a problem with the way the top two screws were seating, because it is either too narrow or the screws are too thick. They weren't seating properly. So you can see that I turned it down, made it thinner. Check your screws on the top two and make sure they seat all the way in. Turn them upside down like that. If not, you're going to have to turn them. You can see that I repaired this one. I want to take out the other one too and check it just to make sure, because you won't get an accurate torque reading. See, this is what it looked like before. It's got a rounded knurled end. So then I turned it and made it just a little bit thinner. And this is what it looks like now. And now I know it's going to seat properly. Then I retorqued everything 30, then 60, then 90. Now everything's sitting just fine. 2 screws are supplied with the unit to fill those 2 holes. This is purely cosmetic. Comes with washers as well. It's all chrome. So I put these 2 screws in. This will be tightened with 4mm hex. I left the torque wrench on 90 inch-pounds, and I'll be using that to tighten these down. Moving to the front of the bike, I'm going to remove the bottom of this bracket. This is 5mm hex. Then I'm quickly going to clean the area of the frame that this bracket's going to be mounted to. As I adjust the bracket back and forth, I don't need dirt grinding into the paint or the bracket or both. So now I want to get this bracket on around the frame, connected to the whole unit, but I want it loosely fitted. I'm not trying to tighten anything down. I just want the 2 screws back in, wrapped around. We'll worry about tightening this down once the bracket is set in its proper location. We can see this gap right here. I could actually pop this whole bracket down, exert a little bit of force. We can hear it click into place. Once I had it in the right position, I just progressively started snugging each one of those bolts until it was tight. I'll tell you that as I show it here, I ended up moving it another centimeter towards the high side even after I showed the footage in this video. So I wanted it just a little bit further because I felt it was putting just a tiny bit of a strain on the hoses. But, you know, the installation was the same. So everything fits real nice. Installation was smooth. You know, only a couple of minor issues with the screws fitting. But I'll remove the protective plastic now. And we're ready to slap on the filter at this point. Make sure I get all the plastic, of course. Just wanted to show that minor adjustment I did, taking the strain off the hoses. Also recheck the hoses and make sure they're tight. So now I'm going to peel away the protective wrapping from the oil filter. Now I'm going to apply some fresh oil around this rubber seal. We'll just spin this filter right on. And we're done. Let's reassemble everything and fill with oil. Went and took this opportunity to clean and detail all the lower portion of the high side of the bike. This also includes the pipe that we're about to install. You may not have access to all these areas like this for a long time, so it's a good idea to do so. We're going to be lightly coating the exhaust studs with Permatex Anti-Seize. Then we'll be drawing the nuts up onto the studs to make sure the coating is evenly applied, then wiping off the excess. Carefully negotiate the pipe behind the reservoir through the frame and just rest it down for a second so I could reposition myself. Take my time here, do it slowly. Now laying here at the front so I can clearly see the studs, I lift up the pipe. I'm going to rotate it slightly so I can see the studs line up with the holes of the pipe. So I raise the pipe up, I'm just going to mash them up and then push it forward so it seats. Just like that, real easy. I'm going to secure it with the nuts immediately, just loose fit, so everything's set in place. Put the second one on. You'll notice that there was absolutely zero force applied in any of this procedure. And the pipe is in. You can see that as I lift the pipe with my hand, I take off a little bit of the stress of the weight. I can take my fingers and tighten up the nuts just a little bit further. What I'm going to need is a socket now so I can get a better grip on it. So now I have a socket on an extension. I'm doing the same thing. I'm just taking a little bit of the weight off and I'm just hand turning it. I really can't apply any pressure because it's just slipping from my hands, just a couple foot-pounds, maybe one or two. It's just to take the slack out, nothing more. I still want this pipe a little bit loose, which it is, because I still need to put the rest of the assembly of this exhaust system on. Now I'll mount the other half of the exhaust. Took this opportunity to clean up this muffler. And I'll remove this exhaust mounting bolt that I had stored in the frame before. I've prepared a 6mm hex on an extension. I'm now going to shimmy the exhaust back onto the pipe. I'm going to keep doing this, slowly rocking it on, and we can see that as I do this, the hole in the exhaust pipe mount is slowly aligning itself with the mount on the bike for the bolt. Right over here. So now I take that bolt with the extension, and I'm just going to run it through. I don't want this bolt tight though, I want to leave just a little bit of slack so the pipe can still wiggle. Now I'm going to progressively tighten down the nuts on the front studs with 12mm socket. I'm using a really short ratchet so I can't exert too much pressure. I'm just going to snug them, that's it. I don't want to break anything. Now using the 11mm socket, I'm going to tighten down this clamp. Again, I'm going to snug this down good, but I'm not out to destroy anything. Remember, you can always make it tighter, but make it too tight and break it, and then you're in trouble. We'll now be revisiting this mounting bolt for the exhaust, snugging it down tight now. I'll now be using a 12mm socket to tighten up those bolts that I loosened to move the floorboard out of the way. Those will be tightened up progressively, one after the other, and then when they're both fully seated, I'll then be putting some torque on them. I'll just be snugging them down nice and tight. Give the rear brake pedal a quick check, make sure everything's functioning properly. I'm going to remove the screw from the bracket that holds in the rear brake reservoir. I'm going to slide the protective metal cover over it, get it into position. We could drop that screw through and mount everything back to the bracket. We're going to tighten this down with 8mm. Clean up the oil drain bolt, ready to go back in. Clean around the surrounding area with a paper towel. Then we'll turn it all the way in by hand. Never use a ratchet. Don't want to cross thread it. And I'm just going to snug that down good. I'm using a very short wrench. I can't exert a lot of force on this from down here. After cleaning around the surrounding area, I open up the oil fill cap. Make sure you're using a clean funnel for this task. If not, wash it and dry it. Ensure that it's clean. I like to lock this in between the fins to make sure it doesn't fall. And I'll be using 1040 Yamalube. This is appropriate for my region, may not be appropriate for yours. Have the boss holding the bike level right now as I fill oil into the funnel. I'm looking down through the port here and I'm waiting for the oil level to get just a hair over the center mark because I know we're going to lose a little bit of oil after it runs and fills up the filter and the hoses and what have you. Now at the right level, we're going to close it up. We're going to run the bike. We're going to test it out. Make sure you clean that cap and the surrounding area before you put the cap back on. As we now inspect our work, it's very important that we are constantly looking back at the oil pressure light right here to make sure that this is never illuminating. We want to pay attention to all of the fittings and the hoses and the connections onto the engine. Make sure there's no oil leaking out of here. Look from this direction as well. I would actually recommend letting the bike heat up, maybe about 10 minutes. Let everything come to temperature, then shut it off, allow everything to cool down. Make sure that there are no leaks. Going around from different angles, looking at everything, making sure positively there's not going to be a problem when it's on the road. It's easy to address in the garage. Also from the oil filter too, you want to make sure that you don't have any oil leaking from there, that the filter's on good. And remembering that when it does cool down, you have to check the oil again. As expected, mine dropped from the center mark all the way down to the bottom mark after I allowed it to cool down and the oil to settle. I hope you found this video on the installation of the Baron Oil Relocation Kit helpful, enjoyable, insightful. Hit that like button down below, helps me out a lot when you do. Hit that subscribe button for more videos as they come out. Thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching. Would you like to reply?